We are looking at a stack of documents today that tell a story everyone thinks they know. But, well, very few actually do.
That's right.
It is the story of Sharon Tate. And if you were to stop someone on the street and ask them about her, the association is almost immediate.
Oh, absolutely.
It's singular. It's the Manson family. It's August 1969. It's the tragedy.
It is the defining narrative, unfortunately. For more than 50 years, Sharon Tate has been sort of frozen in the cultural amber as, a victim. She is principally defined by the horrific events of her death.
Right.
But when you look at the biographical record, the actual documents, the letters, the contemporary accounts, you find a distinct 26-year existence that predates that one night. Our mission with this analysis is to essentially decouple the woman from the crime.
Which is a difficult task, I imagine, given how sensationalized the crime was.
Extremely difficult. But the material we have allows us to examine her trajectory, from a childhood spent in the transient high-pressure world of a military family to her calculated ascent within the Hollywood studio system.
And her actual work.
Exactly. We need to look at her specific contributions to film in the 1960s, which are often overlooked, and perhaps most significantly, the tangible legislative changes that her family spearheaded in her name.
The victims' rights movement.
Yes. There is a legacy here that has nothing to do with Hollywood and everything to do with the American legal system.
To understand that legacy and the person behind it, we have to start at the beginning. In the beginning, it wasn't in Hollywood.
No.
It was in Texas.
That's right. Sharon Ray Tate was born on January 24th, 1943 in Dallas. She was the eldest of 3 daughters born to Doris Gwendolyn and Paul James Tate.
And her father's profession is really the key here.
It's the critical lens through which we have to view her entire childhood. He wasn't just in the military. He was a colonel in the United States Army, working specifically in
intelligence.
Right, intelligence. And that dictated everything.
That implies a certain level of secrecy, I'm sure. But for the family, it mostly implied constant movement.
Constant movement. The nature of Colonel Tate's career just structured Sharon's entire life. It was a classic military brat existence, but perhaps even more intense than average.
Oh, so?
Well, by the time Sharon reached the age of 16, she had lived in 6 different cities. I mean, we're talking about a fundamental lack of geographic stability.
That kind of transience during your developmental years usually leaves a mark.
The sources indicate it absolutely did. Her family described her as incredibly shy and lacking in self-confidence during those formative years.
Now that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. If you are constantly the new girl, you're always having to assess new social hierarchies, new schools, new neighborhoods. You just don't have that safety net of lifelong friends.
She actually spoke about this, didn't she?
She did. Sharon later explained it herself. She said that throughout her life, people often misinterpreted her shyness as aloofness.
Because she was quiet.
Because she was reserved. She noted that until people got to know her, they thought she was stuck up or, distant. But in reality, she was simply observing.
A survival mechanism.
Exactly. It was a mechanism she developed from having to constantly adapt to new environments without a permanent social anchor. She learned to sit back and watch before she would engage.
Despite this shyness, though, she wasn't hiding in her room. The record shows she was pushed into the spotlight very, very early on.
Pushed might be the right word, or perhaps just placed. It started incredibly early. At just 6 months old, she won the Miss Tiny Tot of Dallas pageant.
6 months old.
6 months. Now, the sources are clear that her parents, Paul and Doris, they didn't harbor these grand ambitions for show business at that stage. They weren't stage parents.
But her appearance.
Her appearance was simply undeniable. It drew attention wherever they were stationed.
And this led to the pageant circuit when she was a teenager.
Yes. By the late 1950s, she began entering beauty pageants more seriously. In 1959, when she was 16, the family was stationed in Washington State. She entered and won the title of Miss Richland.
And that wasn't a small local event.
No, it was a significant regional title.
Did she view this as a potential career path? I mean, was she thinking about Hollywood at 16?
Surprisingly, no. The historical record is very clear on her stated ambitions at this time. She planned to study psychiatry.
Psychiatry?
Yes, she was interested in the mind, which, perhaps it stemmed from her own observations of people as she moved from place to place. She did intend to compete in the Miss Washington pageant in 1960, which could have been a stepping stone to Miss America, but
The military lifestyle intervened again.
Exactly. The orders came down. Her father was transferred to Italy. The whole family relocated to Verona.
And this move is really the pivot point, isn't it?
It's the pivot point.
Yeah.
It closed the chapter on her American high school experience, but it opened the door to her first real brushes with the entertainment industry.
Italy in the early 1960s was a very specific cultural environment.
It was unique. You had what was often called Hollywood on the Tiber. American productions were flocking to Italy because it was cheaper to film there, and, the scenery was spectacular.
But her entry point wasn't directly into film.
No, it was actually the military press. A photograph of her in a swimsuit was published on the cover of the military newspaper Stars and Stripes.
And that paper went everywhere in the European theater.
It did. That cover made her a local celebrity within the military community across Europe almost overnight. She was attending Vicenza American High School from 1960 to 61, and for the first time, she wasn't just the shy new girl, she was a known quantity.
And that's where she found her people, so to speak.
Yes, biography accounts note that this is where she finally found a sense of kinship. She connected with other students at the American school who shared that specific background of displacement. They all had fathers in the service, they all moved constantly.
For the first time, she had lasting friendships.
Described as lasting, deep friendships.
So she has this social base, she has some local fame, and she's in Italy, where movies are being made. How did she make that jump from high school student to a film set?
It started with extra work. Because so many productions were filming nearby, there was a constant need for American-looking crowds or background actors. Tate and her friends managed to get work as extras on the set of Hemingway's Adventures of a Young Man.
A huge production.
Oh, a major production. You had Paul Newman, Susan Strasberg, big names.
And this wasn't just standing in the background. She actually caught someone's eye.
She caught the eye of Richard Beimer. Beimer was a rising star at the time. He had just done West Side Story. He noticed Tate in the crowd.
And they started dating.
They did during the production. And Beimer was really the catalyst. He was the one who encouraged her to pursue a film career seriously. He saw something in her that went beyond just being a pretty face in the background.
She also had an encounter with a true Hollywood heavyweight, Jack Palance.
That happened shortly after, in 1961. She was hired as an extra again for the film Barabbas, which was filming near Verona, another massive biblical epic. Jack Palance was one of the stars, and he was impressed by her look and her attitude.
Even as an extra.
Even as an extra. Her role was too small to really judge her acting, but Palance arranged a screen test for her in Rome.
That's a huge opportunity for a teenager.
It was. But that specific test didn't lead to immediate work. It was more of a validation, a sign that she belonged in front of a camera.
But then a family crisis pulled her back.
Yes. Just as things were gaining momentum, her mother, Doris Tate, suffered a nervous breakdown. Sharon, who had briefly returned to the United States to test the waters, was persuaded to return to Italy to help care for the family. It shows a strong sense of familial duty that always ran parallel to her ambitions.
But eventually, the family came back to the U.S. for good.
They did. The whole family moved back to the United States in 1962. Sharon moved to Los Angeles, and this is where the professional machinery starts to turn.
The first step being an agent.
Immediately. She contacted Harold Gefsky, who was Richard Beimer's agent. Because of Beimer's recommendation, Gefsky agreed to represent her. This led to the standard entry-level work: television commercials, magazine ads. But the pivotal moment came in 1963.
This is when she met Martin Ranselhoff.
Correct. Gefsky introduced her to Martin Ranselhoff, the director of Filmways, Inc. Now, Ranselhoff was a powerful figure. He signed her to a 7-year contract.
We have to pause on that. A 7-year contract in 1963 was a serious commitment.
It was a massive commitment. The old studio system was crumbling, but Ranselhoff was operating with that old-school mentality of basically owning a star.
He had a very specific strategy for her, didn't he? He didn't just throw her into the deep end.
No, he did the opposite. He employed what's often called the slow build. Ranselhoff was incredibly protective of her image and her debut. He was quoted in a 1967 Playboy article saying, "Mr. Ranselhoff didn't want the audience to see me till I was ready."
He was treating her like an investment.
A precision instrument that needed tuning.
So she was actually missing out on roles because of this strategy.
She was. She was considered for the role of Billie Joe Bradley on the popular sitcom Petticoat Junction. Ranselhoff rejected the idea. He believed she lacked the necessary confidence and that a recurring TV role might overexpose her before she was, polished.
So instead, he put her in these smaller, almost hidden parts.
Exactly. What we can call training roles. She had small parts in Mr. Ed and the Beverly Hillbillies.
And in the Beverly Hillbillies, They went to great lengths to make sure she wasn't recognized as Sharon Tate.
Right. She played the character Janet Trago, but she wore a dark wig. Ransohoff didn't want her signature blonde look to be associated with a minor television role. He was saving the reveal of the real Sharon Tate for a major film debut. It was a level of career curation that is almost unheard of today.
While Ransoff is managing her career, she's navigating her personal life in Hollywood. She had a relationship with a French actor, Philippe Forquet.
That began in 1963. They became engaged, but the sources describe the relationship as incredibly volatile.
For a lot of fighting.
Frequent arguments, likely made worse by the pressure of their careers. Forquet was trying to break through. Tate was under Ransohoff's thumb. They broke up in 1964.
And then she met Jay Sebring.
Yes, in 1964, she entered a relationship that would define much of her life in Hollywood. She met Jay Sebring.
And Jay Sebring is a name that is inextricably linked to hers. Who was he at this time?
Sebring was a former sailor who had completely reinvented himself. He was the leading hairstylist for men in Hollywood. He essentially invented the modern men's salon.
So he was a big deal in his own right.
A very big deal. Wealthy, connected, and by all accounts, deeply in love with Sharon. Tate described his nature as especially gentle. He provided a kind of stability she hadn't really had.
Did they plan to marry?
Sebring proposed. He wanted to marry her, but Sharon declined.
Why?
Her reasoning gives a lot of insight into her mindset. She stated that she intended to focus on her career. She held a very traditional view that if she married, she would have to retire from acting to be a wife and mother. She just wasn't ready to give up the career she was working so hard to build.
But they didn't drift apart.
No, and that is the unique part of their story. Despite her rejecting the proposal, Sebring remained her closest confidant. He transitioned from boyfriend to best friend.
And he later befriended Roman Polanski.
He did. The friendship endured literally until the final moments of their lives. It really speaks to a very deep, unusual bond between them.
So back on the professional front, the slow build eventually had to end. But it wasn't a straight line to success. She faced some pretty significant rejections.
She did. In 1964, she screen tested for the film The Cincinnati Kid, a major project starring Steve McQueen.
A huge star.
She auditioned for the female lead opposite him. The director was Sam Peckinpah, a notorious tough guy in Hollywood. Ransohoff and Peckinpah both agreed that Tate's timidity and lack of experience would cause her to flounder in such a large part.
So she lost the role.
The role went to Tuesday Weld instead.
And she also missed out on The Sound of Music.
She auditioned for the role of Lysol, the eldest daughter. She didn't get it. So you have this period of high-stakes auditions and near misses. It wasn't until late 1965 that Ransohoff finally decided she was ready.
And he cast her in Eye of the Devil.
This was the breakthrough, the official launch. She was cast as Odile, a witch who exerts this mysterious supernatural power over a landowner played by David Niven.
In a very serious cast.
Heavy-hitting. David Niven, Deborah Kerr, Donald Pleasance.
The subject matter, witchcraft, required some interesting preparation.
It did. The production filmed in France and London. To prepare for the role, Tate and Jay Sebring actually met with the Alexandrian Wiccan high priest and priestess, Alex and Maxine Sanders, in London.
Really?
Yes. They wanted to understand the history and the ritualistic aspects of the character. It shows she took the research seriously. She wasn't just showing up to read lines.
How did these veteran actors react to her? I mean, she was essentially a rookie coming in with a lot of hype.
Well, initially there was skepticism. The director, J. Lee Thompson, had serious doubts. He's on record saying that he and Ransohoff agreed that if she wasn't making it after 2 weeks of filming, they would fire her.
So just put her back on the shelf.
Back into cold storage, as he put it. The pressure on her must have been immense.
But she stayed.
She didn't just stay, she won them over. Thompson later admitted she was tremendously exciting on screen. David Niven described her as a great discovery.
And Deborah Kerr.
Deborah Kerr, one of the most respected actresses of the era, predicted that with a reasonable amount of luck, Tate would be a great success. And Tate was humble about it. She later said she learned a great deal about acting just by watching Deborah Kerr work.
And to promote this, the machine kicked into high gear.
Oh, yes. They released a promotional documentary called All Eyes on Sharon Tate. It was a signal to the industry that she had arrived. And it was after this production that the most significant personal and professional merger of her life occurred.
She met Roman Polanski.
She met Roman Polanski.
Polanski was already a known quantity in international cinema.
He was a major figure. He was preparing to film The Fearless Vampire Killers. Now, the initial meeting between them was not love at first sight.
Not at all, from what I've read.
No, in fact, neither was impressed by the other. Polanski had a specific vision for the female lead. He wanted the red-headed actress Jill St. John. He thought Tate was too classically American beauty for the role.
But Ransohoff intervened again.
Ransohoff was co-producing the film, and he insisted on casting Tate. He wanted his star in his movie. Polanski eventually agreed, but he made a condition.
The wig.
Sharon had to wear a red wig during filming to match his original vision.
Polanski directed it, but he also acted in it, right?
Yes. He played a main character who falls in love with Tate's character. The working dynamic on set was rigorous.
A perfectionist.
Polanski was and is known as a perfectionist. There are reports of one specific scene requiring 70 takes before he was satisfied.
That could break an actor.
It could, but Tate endured it. And as filming progressed, Polanski's opinion of her acting capabilities shifted. He began to praise her performance. And naturally, the lines between the film and reality blurred.
Their professional relationship evolved.
It evolved into a romantic one. After filming concluded, she moved into his London apartment.
So we arrive at 1967, and if you look at the timeline, this is the year everything just seems to accelerate for her.
1967 is often cited as the peak year of her emergence. A Playboy article from March of that year began with the phrase, "This is the year that Sharon Tate happens."
And that article featured nude photographs.
Yes, taken by Polanski on the set of Vampire Killers, which generated a massive amount of publicity.
She also starred in a film called Don't Make Waves that year.
This was a pivot to comedy and commercial appeal. It was a beach movie designed to capitalize on the surf culture popularity. She played a character literally named Malibu.
A role that really emphasized her physical appearance.
Almost exclusively.
How did she feel about that? She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress.
She disliked it intensely. She was disappointed with the film and sarcastically referred to herself as sexy little me in interviews. She even confided to a reporter that it was a terrible movie.
So it was a source of frustration for her.
A huge source of frustration. She felt she was being pigeonholed as a sex symbol rather than a serious performer.
But then came the role that she is most associated with, aside from the tragedy, Valley of the Dolls.
Valley of the Dolls was a cultural phenomenon before it was even a movie. The novel was a massive bestseller. The film production was highly anticipated. Tate was cast as Jennifer North.
And the character of Jennifer North had some pretty striking parallels to Tate's own life.
The parallels were striking. Jennifer North is an aspiring actress who is admired only for her body, not her talent. It mirrored Tate's own struggles with the industry's perception of her.
Did she like the role?
She admitted she did not like the book or the script. She found it trashy, but she recognized the career opportunity. It was a vehicle to stardom.
The production environment sounds like it was difficult.
It was hostile. The director, Mark Robson, was reportedly very hard on her. Co-star Patty Duke later started that Robson treated Tate like an imbecile, constantly undermining her intelligence.
But Duke defended her.
She did. Duke insisted that Tate was definitely not an imbecile and stood up for her.
When the movie came out, the critics absolutely destroyed it.
They eviscerated it. Newsweek called it a witless travesty. Bosley Crowther in the New York Times wrote that all an admirer of movies could do was laugh at it and turn away.
It became a camp classic.
Almost immediately because it was so over the top.
But Sharon Tate escaped the worst of the criticism.
She did. In fact, she was often singled out as the best thing in it. Roger Ebert, writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, praised Tate, calling her a wonder to behold.
So she got good notices from a bad film.
Yes. And despite the negative reviews for the film itself, the role earned Tate a Golden Globe Award nomination for New Star of the Year actress. It's solidified her status. She had survived a critical bomb and come out with a nomination.
During the press tour for these films, she was asked frequently about nudity, right?
Constantly. It was the late 60s, censorship was relaxing, and she had appeared nude in Vampire Killers and Playboy.
And her response was quite modern.
Very pragmatic. She stated she saw no difference between being naked or dressed if it was part of the job and done with meaning, but she actually used the opportunity to make a social critique.
About violence.
Yes, she contrasted nudity with the violence shown on television. She pointed out the hypocrisy that children could watch people murdering each other, which she called unnatural, but couldn't watch two people making love, which she viewed as a natural process.
That's a haunting observation, given what was to come.
It is incredibly haunting. She was critiquing a culture of violence that would eventually consume her.
Let's look at 1968. She marries Roman Polanski.
They were married on January 20th, 1968. in London. The press covered it extensively. It was a major celebrity event.
How is their marriage described?
Photographer Peter Evans described them as the imperfect couple, calling them cool, nomadic, and nicely shocking. They really represented the new wave of Hollywood international, unconventional, young.
But the marriage itself had a complex dynamic.
It was very complex. Polanski was quoted as saying he wanted a hippie, not a housewife. He made it clear he didn't want to be tied down by traditional marital expectations. He remained promiscuous throughout the marriage.
And she wanted something different.
According to sources, she wanted a traditional marriage. You have to remember, she was raised in a military family. But she accepted his conditions to maintain the relationship.
There's a quote from her that's very telling.
Yes, she was quoted as saying, "Roman lies to me and I pretend to believe him." It implies a certain sadness or resignation to the reality of who he was.
They moved to Los Angeles and eventually to the house on Cielo Drive.
They moved into 150 Cielo Drive in February 1969. And this house becomes a character in the story. Tate was thrilled with the property. She referred to it as her love house. It was secluded, beautiful, tucked away in the canyons.
And their social life there was very 1969.
It was the epicenter of the counterculture mixing with the Hollywood elite. Their social circle included Steve McQueen, Warren Beatty, Jane Fonda, musicians like the Mamas and the Papas.
And the atmosphere was open?
Live and let live. Friends noted that the house was often full of strangers, people who had just met someone at a party and tagged along. Leslie Caron, a friend of Tate's, commented that the Polanskis were too trusting.
They didn't lock doors.
No. They assumed everyone meant well.
Amidst this social whirlwind, she was still working. She did a film called The Wrecking Crew in 1968.
This was a comedy starring Dean Martin as the spy Matt Helm. Tate played Freya Carlson, an accident-prone guide. And this role is important because it showed her range. She wasn't just a prop, she was funny.
And she did her own stunts.
She did. To prepare, she was taught martial arts by none other than Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee?
Yes, he was working in Hollywood as a stunt coordinator and trainer at the time. The reviews for this performance were strong, highlighting her comedic timing. Dean Martin was impressed enough that he wanted her for the next installment of the Matt Helm series.
So this was pointing toward a new direction for her career.
Critics today often look at The Wrecking Crew as the best evidence of the long career she could have had as a comedic actress.
By 1969, everything is in place. She is a rising star, she's married, and she is pregnant.
She became pregnant near the end of 1968. In early 1969, she traveled to Italy one last time to film The 13 Chairs with Orson Welles.
That must have been a grueling shoot.
Especially for a pregnant woman. After filming, she went to London to be with Polanski, who was working on The Day of the Dolphin. But because she was unable to travel late in her pregnancy, she returned to Los Angeles alone.
She traveled by ship.
She returned on the Queen Elizabeth II, arriving on July 20, 1969. Polanski was delayed in London, but was scheduled to return on August 12, just in time for the birth.
So she was alone in the house.
Well, because he couldn't be there immediately, he asked his friends, Wojciech Frykowski and Abigail Folger, to stay in the house with Tate so she wouldn't be alone.
We are now at the point where we must address the events of August 1969. We need to go through the timeline factual. Start with August 8th.
On Friday, August 8, 1969, the day began normally. Sharon Tate had lunch with actress Joanna Patet at the Cielo Drive house. Tate expressed disappointment that Polanski was delayed and wouldn't be home for a few more days.
And she spoke to her sister.
Later in the day, she spoke to her younger sister, Debra, on the phone. Debra asked if she could come over to the house to keep her company. Sharon declined the offer, likely because she was tired and had other guests.
Who were the guests that evening?
That evening, the group went to dinner at El Coyote Cafe, a Mexican restaurant. The group consisted of Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, her former fiancé and best friend Wojciech Frykowski, who was a friend of Polanski's from Poland, and Abigail Folger, the coffee heiress who was dating Frykowski.
And they went back to the house.
They returned to the property on Cielo Drive at approximately 10:30 p.m.
And then after midnight.
Shortly after midnight, into the early hours of August 9, members of the Manson Family cult entered the property. They cut the telephone lines.
The first victim wasn't even in the house.
No. The first victim was Stephen Parent, an 18-year-old man who had been visiting the property's caretaker in the guest house. He was driving his car toward the gate when he was stopped and shot in the driveway. He had absolutely no connection to the house or the people inside.
He was just in the wrong place.
Simply in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And inside the main house.
The perpetrators entered the main house. What followed was a chaotic and brutal sequence of events. They rounded up the occupants. Jay Seabrung, attempting to defend Tate, was shot and stabbed. Wojciech Frykowski and Abigail Folger managed to escape the living room but were pursued onto the lawn and killed.
And Sharon Tate remained inside.
She remained in the living room. We know the details of her final moments from the court records.
And she pleaded for her baby.
She did. She was the last to die. She pleaded for her life, not for herself, but for her child. She asked to be taken with them as a hostage so she could give birth. Her pleas were ignored.
The discovery of the scene the next morning shattered the industry.
The housekeeper, Winifred Chapman, arrived the next morning and discovered the bodies. When police arrived, they found a scene of extreme brutality. A long rope was tied around the necks of Sharon Tate and Jay Seabrung, connecting them over a ceiling beam.
And the coroner's report.
The coroner's report stated that Tate had been stabbed 16 times. 5 of those wounds were determined to be fatal in and of themselves. The cause of death was massive hemorrhage. On the front door of the house, the word pig was found written in Tate's blood.
Polanski was still in Europe.
He was notified and returned to Los Angeles immediately. He was in a state of absolute shock. In the immediate aftermath, he made a decision that was heavily criticized at the time.
The Life magazine photos.
Yes, he allowed a photographer from Life magazine to photograph him in the crime scene, sitting next to the door with the word pig still visible.
Why did he do that?
He later explained that he hoped the shock value of the photo would compel someone to come forward with information. He wanted the public to see the horror so they would help find the killers.
And for weeks, no one knew who did it.
No one knew. The Manson family wasn't identified immediately.
The funeral followed shortly after.
The funeral for Sharon Tate was held on August 13th at Holy Cross Cemetery. She was buried with her unborn son in her arms. He was posthumously named Paul Richard Polanski.
The psychological impact on Hollywood was unlike anything that had happened before.
It caused widespread, absolute panic. The brutality of the crime and the fact that it happened in a secure, wealthy enclave terrified the community. The writer Dominic Dunn recalled that the shockwaves were unique. People believed the rich and famous were specifically being targeted by some organized group.
People started arming themselves.
They did. Steve McQueen reportedly packed a gun to take to Jay Seabrung's funeral. Frank Sinatra and others hired private security details, armed guards.
So that open, trusting atmosphere.
It ended that night. The era of the open door was over. The author Joan Didion famously wrote that the 60s ended abruptly on August 9th, 1969. The tension that had been building in the culture finally broke, and the paranoia was fulfilled.
Eventually, the Manson family was arrested and convicted. But the story of Sharon Tate doesn't end with the trial. It continues through her mother, Doris Tate.
This is a crucial part of the narrative that often gets glossed over. For more than a decade after the murders, the family grieved. But in the early 1980s, something happened that spurred Doris into action.
One of the killers was up for parole.
Yes, one of the convicted killers, Leslie Van Houten, gathered enough signatures to petition for parole.
The idea that one of the killers could walk free was unacceptable to her.
It was horrifying to her. California law at the time was very different, so Doris Tate launched a counter-campaign. She gathered over 350,000 signatures from the public to deny the parole.
And she succeeded.
She did. But she realized that the system was flawed. The focus was heavily on the rights and rehabilitation of the perpetrator, with very little consideration for the victims or their families.
So she went to work, changing the law.
She became a relentless advocate for victims' rights. Doris Tate fundamentally changed the way victim impact is handled in California and, by extension, the United States. She campaigned for amendments that allowed victims and their families to speak at parole hearings and sentencing phases.
Before this, they weren't allowed to speak.
Generally, no. The victim was considered a witness for the state, not a party with the right to address the court regarding the impact of the crime. Doris changed that. In 1982, she helped pass the Victims' Bill of Rights in California.
There's a famous moment in 1990 involving Doris and one of the killers.
Yes. During a parole hearing for Tex Watson, who was the primary executioner that night, Doris utilized the rights she had fought for. She addressed him directly.
What did she say?
She looked at him and asked, "What mercy, sir, did you show my daughter when she was begging for her life?"
A powerful moment.
Incredibly powerful. It humanized the victim in a process that is usually very bureaucratic.
Her work was recognized at the highest levels.
It was. In 1992, President George H.W. Bush recognized Doris Tate as one of his 1,000 points of light for her volunteer work and advocacy. She took a personal tragedy and turned it into a legislative shield for others.
Doris passed away in 1992, but the family continued the work.
Sharon's younger sister, Patty Tate, took over the mantle. She founded the Doris Tate Crime Victims Bureau to continue lobbying for legislation.
And she famously confronted Geffen Records in 1993.
She did. They were planning to include a song written by Charles Manson on a Guns N' Roses album as a hidden track.
That caused a huge controversy.
Patty argued that it put Manson on a pedestal for young people and re-victimized the families. The record company eventually agreed to donate the royalties from that track to the son of one of the other victims, but the moral victory belonged to Patty.
And the work still continues.
After Patty's death in 2000, the remaining sister, Deborah Tate, continued to represent the family at every single parole hearing, ensuring the killers remained incarcerated.
As we look back now, from the perspective of today, there seems to be a reassessment of Sharon Tate happening.
There is. In recent years, there has been a shift to reevaluate her talent separate from her death. For a long time, she was just the victim. Now, critics like Leonard Maltin have noted her potential as a comedian, specifically citing her performance in The Wrecking Crew.
A realization that she was developing into a very capable comedic actress.
Yes.
And films like Valley of the Dolls have found a new audience.
Valley of the Dolls and Eye of the Devil have achieved cult status. They are appreciated now for their aesthetic and their place in film history, and recently we've seen portrayals in pop culture.
Like Margot Robbie in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Exactly. That film was interesting because it attempted to give her a happy ending, or at least restore her humanity, by showing her just living her life, going to the movies, buying a book, being a person.
Biographer Greg King has a specific view on her legacy.
Greg King argues that while her film career was promising, her real legacy is the victims' rights work established by her family. That work transformed her from a mere victim of a crime into a figure of change in the justice system.
So because of her death and her mother's work?
Because of Sharon Tate and because of Doris Tate, thousands of victims today have a voice in court that they simply didn't have in 1969.
It creates a duality in how we remember her.
Precisely. It is a duality. On one side, there is the actress she was becoming, confident, comedic, talented, and beautiful. On the other side, there is the symbol she became, which ultimately led to a more voice-driven justice system.
We can look at the films to see who she was.
And we can look at the laws to see what her memory achieved.
It is a heavy story, but one that is important to understand beyond the headlines. Thanks for listening.